Good afternoon, Mark Scheifmeyer, the hearing examiner for the city of Yelm. I've been asked to convene a public hearing in reference to an application for preliminary plat approval for property at 407 Longmire Street Northwest, the applicant being Habitat for Humanity, seeking approval of a 22 lot development on a 2.3 acre parcel located at that address. The purpose of today is to conduct a public hearing relative to that application. That hearing takes three forms. It's an opportunity for city staff, in this case, Mr. Wiebe, who I've not worked with before, to present the city's receipt of the application, its review of that application, and its recommendations. Once the city has completed its presentation, we'll then turn to the applicant to add to or subtract from whatever the city has proposed. And then once we've heard from the applicant, to turn it over to the public hearing portion. And so with respect to that portion, the record should reflect there are about a dozen or more people present today. So a few things about that. Given the number of people, I'm going to ask that if you wish to testify first, you'll come to the podium. You'll be identify yourself. You'll be sworn. Everybody who testifies today, including city staff, the applicant, and members of the public, everyone will be sworn under oath. Once you've been sworn, you're free to say what you would like. Sorry about that. That's right. If you wish to be heard, you'll be sworn. I am going to ask a limit of 5 minutes per testimony, given the number of people. That's just out of courtesy, so that the people who are waiting longer aren't waiting too long. And 5 minutes is a long time. It's difficult to talk for more than 5 minutes. But if for some reason you feel your presentation will be longer than that, you can let me know and explain why, and I'll likely approve a lengthier presentation time. So if you wish to testify, it's important that you understand how this works. So most importantly, it's critical that you understand that this is a fact-finding hearing. That may or may not mean anything to anybody, but it's a very important distinction. This is not a political process. This is a fact-finding hearing. And so this is not the equivalent of a hearing before the city council. It's not anything like a hearing before the city council. So if you're appearing before the city council, you would be expressing what you believe to be a common belief, or what you think is a public opinion, or a public sentiment toward the application, either for or against. Before me, that type of popularity of a project has no relevance. And in fact, I'm not to consider it. So I don't count the number of people who are for or against any project. I'm not allowed to. I'm not allowed to consider the number of people who favor or disfavor a project. I'm not allowed to consider any testimony that's suggesting that others are of a like mind. That type of testimony, simply by law, not what I'm allowed to consider. And so that sometimes surprises and annoys people, that their petitions or that their other expressions of a popular sentiment are not going to be considered by me. But I have to let you know in advance that is the standard in which I undertake fact-finding hearings. And so you need to think about that in your intended testimony, in that what I'm seeking is not evidence that others may feel the same as you, but why you feel your particular point of view is an accurate one or a factually correct one. And so if you're to seek to testify, getting up and saying, Mr. Hearing Examiner, I'm opposed to this application, and then sitting down, hasn't done me any real help. Whereas if you were to say, Mr. Scheifmeyer, I'm opposed to this application for the following 4 reasons, Well, that's the type of hearing, that's the type of information that would be valuable to me. Not the fact that you are opposed, but the reasons for your opposition, or similarly, the reasons for your support. So again, keep that in mind. What I'm looking for are facts that move the ball down the field, facts that get me to a better, fuller understanding of the application relative to the city's statutes. And all of this is in application to the city's development regulations. So the final decision I make will be taking into consideration the city's recommendations, the applicant's responses, and the public's comments relative to those statutes that I have to apply to this matter. So it'll be a little bit of time, not too terribly long, before you get to your opportunity to speak. And I have public speaking after the other, so that you get a full hearing of their presentations first to inform your testimony. But when you do, please just keep those ideas in mind. And I do ask that you be respectful of the time request or time restraint I have suggested. Again, that's largely a matter of courtesy. So if we haven't already, I was given a sign-up sheet. Has that been presented? Mr. Cooper, if someone can circulate what this is, maybe not enough, is a sheet of paper. If you wish to be heard, to sign up, please try to make your name as legible as possible. I try, it'll help me hopefully not abuse your name in calling it out. And again, this is if you wish to be heard. If you're simply interested and do not wish to testify, then you don't need to put your names down on the list. And just because you didn't put your name on the list initially does not mean you can't do so later on. Once I've concluded the public testimony, I'll ask if there's anyone else who may have changed their mind about giving testimony today. Okay, those are the basic ground rules. We'll get underway with the testimony from city staff, and that would begin with Mr. Wiebe. So Mr. Wiebe, let's have you sworn. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Go ahead.
All right, I'd like to start by saying thank you to everyone for coming out. I appreciate having members of the public here. I'm going to start with a brief introduction of the project, and then I'm going to get into some key elements of the project, followed by our staff recommendation, including conditions of approval. And I'll end with some community concerns that we had and the city response to those concerns. All right. Habitat for Humanity has proposed to subdivide a 2.3 acre property into 22 residential lots for the purpose of constructing affordable housing. This includes 6 detached single-family homes and 16 townhomes. The proposal includes an internal public street with a cul-de-sac. Prices for these homes will range from 30 to 50% of the area median income, and the property is zoned moderate density residential R6. Habitat for Humanity has proposed this project as a planned residential development overlay within the R6 district. Now, the R6 zone is intended to provide for a greater variety of housing types within the city of Yelm, such as townhomes and duplexes, along with single-family homes. The R6 zone allows between 3 and 6 dwelling units per acre, and a planned residential development, such as this overlay proposed by the applicant, allows for a density bonus of 20%. Now, this overlay is intended to encourage imaginative design and a variety of housing types. And one more note we have, when calculating density in the city of Yelm, we are able to use gross area, which includes all land allocated for open space, streets, and the public right-of-way. The proposal includes the construction of a new public road to provide sole access to the community from Longmire Street. This road will be a dead end and feature a cul-de-sac. This access was determined based on the results of a traffic impact analysis. No parking will be allowed on this new road, and each dwelling unit will provide space for 2 cars in each driveway. The proposal also includes space set aside for a bay filter treatment system for on-site stormwater management. And this system will need to incorporate landscaping as a form of visual relief as a condition for our approval. There is also a tract set aside for open space, which is a requirement for all residential developments in the city. 5% of the gross area of the project must be set aside for open space, and the proposed site plan does meet this requirement. So now I'm going to get into our staff recommendation. The Yelm Municipal Code establishes specific criteria for approval of planned residential developments. There are 6 criteria used, and I will list each of the 6 criteria, and I will discuss how the proposal satisfies those criteria. The first is that it is consistent with the goals and policies of the City of Yelm Comprehensive Plan. The City Comprehensive Plan establishes the goal to create a variety of housing densities and types and to provide for affordable housing within the city. The proposal meets this requirement with its affordable mixture of housing types in townhomes and single-family homes. Second criteria is that it meets the minimum requirement for fire and life safety. We find that the initial proposal does provide adequate fire truck access, and one condition of approval is to provide a fire hydrant plan during the civil review. The third criteria is that it provides adequate provisions for utilities and other public services, roads, streets, and sidewalks necessary to serve the needs of the development. And we find that the proposal will meet these requirements with the required frontage improvements by connecting to city water and sewer and through the payment of impact fees at the time of building permit issuance. The fourth criteria is that there are no unavoidable impacts to adjoining streets and neighborhoods. Now, there was a traffic impact analysis done, and that looked at a variety of access scenarios, and the results of that analysis indicated that the single access on Longmire Street, such as what was proposed, provides the least impact to local traffic and does not diminish existing levels of service. The fifth criteria, the development creates no greater burden on present and public utilities and services than would result from traditional development. We find that the development would not diminish the city's ability to provide adequate utilities and public services to the rest of Yelm's residents. And in addition, the payment of impact fees will offset the impact to neighboring schools, the fire department, and local traffic. And the sixth and final criteria for approval is that the development is better than that resulting from traditional development. Now, in order to discuss how this proposal is better than traditional development, I will reference the City of Yelm's recently adopted Housing Action Plan of June 2023. This action plan was adopted in order to keep pace with housing demand, particularly low-income housing, as one of the fastest growing communities in the region. The Housing Action Plan was adopted with goals to increase the supply and the variety of housing, reduce displacement of low-income residents resulting from development, and to ensure opportunities for housing affordability for residents at all income levels, and to accommodate moderate density options within the city. The Habitat for Humanity proposal for new affordable townhomes and single-family homes thus aligns with the goals of the Housing Action Plan and the Yelm Comprehensive Plan. Therefore, the Public Services Department recommends the approval of this planned residential community subject to the following conditions. And now I will list the 13 conditions that we laid out in our staff report. The first is that frontage improvements on the new road inside the subdivision and also Longmire Street Northwest are required. The frontage improvements along Longmire Street Northwest and the internal street must be constructed per city's adopted local access residential standard as illustrated in Chapter 2 of Yelm's engineering specifications and standard details. Second condition is that final landscaping plan must be submitted as part of the civil plan review, and it shall include details of the streetscape landscaping, stormwater landscaping, and minimum of 5% of the gross land area as qualified open space with an active recreation component. The third condition is that if irrigation is provided, an irrigation plan shall be submitted as part of the landscape plans and compliant with section 13.04.097 of the Yelm Municipal Code. Fourth condition is that street lighting will be required. Fifth condition, pursuant to chapter 18.16 of the Municipal Code, the applicant shall pay school and fire impact fees at the time of building permit issuance. Sixth, the civil engineering plans shall include an addressing map for approval by the building official. Seventh condition, the civil engineering plans shall include the proposed location and details for mailbox placement. And number 8, prior to final subdivision application, a subdivision name must be reserved with the Thurston County Auditor's Office. And number 9, a no parking sign must be installed on the internal road. Number 10, the applicant shall provide a performance assurance device in order to provide for maintenance of the required landscape for the subdivision until the homeowners association becomes responsible for the landscaping maintenance. The performance assurance drive shall be 150% of the anticipated cost to maintain the landscaping for 3 years. The 11th condition, stormwater facilities shall be located in separate recorded tracts owned and maintained by the homeowners association. The stormwater system shall be held in common by the homeowners association, and the homeowners agreement shall include provisions for the assessment of fees against individual lots for the maintenance and repair of the stormwater facilities. All roof drain runoff shall be infiltrated on each lot utilizing individual dry wells. Number 12, the applicant shall submit a fire hydrant plan to the Community Development Department for review and approval as part of the civil engineering plans prior to final subdivision approval. The applicant shall submit fire flow calculations for all existing and proposed hydrants. All hydrants must meet minimum city standards, and the applicant shall be responsible for the fee for hydrant locks on all fire hydrants required and installed as part of the development. These fees shall be collected by the Community Development Department prior to final plat recording. And the 13th and last condition is that the civil engineering plans shall include a search and report of adjacent wells and their locations. Any on-site wells shall be decommissioned and water rights dedicated to the city. Off-site wells within 100 feet of the property shall be identified and well protection radius provided. Okay, after going through all those conditions, I would like to briefly touch on some of the community concerns. We did receive quite a few comments over email prior to this development when we set out our notices of application. Kind of summarizing the concerns, top 4 things I think I found in looking those over were concerns about fire safety, impacts to traffic, the potential lack of adequate parking, and the high density of the proposal. So I'm going to have a brief reply for each of those 4 concerns. And I'll just get started with the fire safety concerns. The proposal does meet all relevant requirements relating to building setbacks and fire truck access. And in addition to that, building permit issuance will require meeting the international fire codes and the international building codes. The second concern, traffic. We did have a traffic impact analysis performed, and that did consider a variety of other access roads and configurations for this development, including access solely from Collins Road instead of Longmire Street, and also a new east-west roadway that would cut through the development completely and connect to both Longmire and Collins. Now, after examining the alternatives, the traffic engineer did recommend the sole access from Longmire Street due to traffic volumes, intersection spacing, and the functional classification of the streets that were proposed to provide access. The traffic engineer also did find that the proposed access would generate no difference in level of service in the forecast 2026 year for nearby intersections. The third concern, parking. Parking has been provided for each dwelling unit with 2 spaces per dwelling unit in each driveway, and this does meet the requirements of our municipal code. And the fourth concern, considering density, this is kind of a more interesting one. We can go into our math if necessary, but the density of the proposal does fall within the allowable density for a planned residential community overlay within the R6 zoning district, thanks to the 20% density bonus provided by the overlay and the way we calculate our gross area, which does include nearby streets, open space, right of way. And I have that all here in the code if you'd like me to specifically cite the code.
Thank you, Mr. Reedy. And I would like you to, I don't know that I found it in the staff report. So the code authority for the density bonus is what?
Well, this is not for the density bonus, but it is for how we calculate gross area.
Oh, okay. The authority for the density bonus, where would it be found?
That would be within our zoning overlay, which is, I think, 18.64. Somewhere within there, you'll see it.
All right.
Comment letters.
Okay, and we'd also like to submit a couple of comment letters that we received. Submit these to the record. We received an email Sunday and also today, about an hour before this meeting. We have those printed out here. We can provide for you.
Okay, let's do some housekeeping in that regard. So the staff report, together with all attachments received in advance, will be Exhibit 1. That includes all public comments received in advance of today's hearing. So what else do you have then for me?
2 emails that were, thank you. 2 emails that were recently received, members from the public expressing their comments.
And the notes are your notes, the little handwritten.
Yeah, sorry about that. I can provide a clean copy over email if you'd like.
I would.
Okay.
I would like it free of any sort of editorial comment. So I'll recognize that there are about the reading glasses. I think it's Christensen. And then also from Kenita Mason. Wasn't expecting to print that small today. So we'll recognize those 2 additional emails as exhibit 2. And I'll review those when I have an opportunity. So back to my questions, Mr. Wiebe. There was public comment expressing concern about the ability of school buses to access the students here off of Longmire. Any particular response you might have to that concern?
Not at this time.
The application has been designed for 2 parking stalls per unit, but no parking on the internal street. And what is the thinking, the philosophy behind the project's design and the absence of any parking internally? What's the thought in behind that design?
I was not here for the original discussions involving parking. My general understanding is that there were concerns about cars cluttering that street and providing site issues. I think that was mostly it from what I understand, and limiting all parking to the driveways was designed to kind of clean that up.
Okay, if there is spillover parking, if any of the 22 units find and needed additional parking, or if they have guests who are not able to park in one of the 2 stalls for that unit, they're going to park on Longmire. Would that be a reasonable parking location? The record should reflect that Mr. Cooper would like to join in. So Mr. Cooper, will have you sworn. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
So Mr. Cooper, consulting planner for the city. And so you've heard my question to Mr. Wiebe. How might you supplement his response?
Okay, just for the record, I'm the planning and building manager.
Okay, I'm one event behind. I apologize. I didn't mean to demean you. Sorry.
Not at all. So I would anticipate that that would be off-site parking, whether it's Longmire or some other street.
Is currently off-site parking allowed on all the adjoining streets?
I'm not totally sure about that. I don't think we have any no parking areas really.
Not on Collins. Collins, on Colts, you can't.
No comment. It is so irresistible to want to contribute, and it's out of a desire to be earnest and helpful, but it actually is unfortunate to the record. And so it's not out of cutting anyone off. There'll be more than ample opportunities, but it needs to come in a certain fashion, or else the record looks pretty milky and clouded. And so, yeah, I'll just ask for that forbearance. So, and certainly invite the opportunity to point such matters out. And by the way, members of the public who may wish to ask questions, let me anticipate that in advance as well. That if you do have a question to ask, the question is asked to me. I then serve as the traffic cop. I then send it to the proper person. That avoids a direct one-on-one, which can become unintentionally acrimonious. And so by me serving as the fielder of those questions, it maintains a much cleaner record and a much more polished answer too. So So in reviewing this application, Mr. Cooper, Mr. Wiebe, any concerns that what we might have is simply a spillover of much traffic into surrounding neighborhood streets of causing some public concern?
So my reply to that is that the event that you described where somebody, I don't know if they have a party or Thanksgiving dinner and they have people over, I could anticipate something like that, off-site parking occurring, which in any neighborhood, sometimes that can be a nuisance for that particular event. But because they are providing 2 on-site parking spaces per unit, that does meet our code. And the reason that we don't want parking on the street, I think, is primarily a public safety issue for fire truck access.
I'm going to guess that in order to achieve your density, you have to reduce your road width. And you don't have the space available for additional parking, given the number of units you're proposing for the project. Is that a fair assumption?
I think I'll let the applicants address that actually, because they're much more familiar with what the site constraints are for the planning of this.
Okay. Remind me what it's going to look like streetwise in terms of streetscape, landscaping, with that has a couple of components. It has the internal streetscape, and then we have the external streetscape. With respect to the internal streetscape, since we do not have parking strips, what do we have that is along that private drive in terms of curbs, gutters, sidewalks, lighting, landscaping? What will we find along that internal street?
Can we also let the applicants address that? I mean, we have landscaping standards that are in the code that have the street trees that are, I forget exactly the spacing on those. There will be landscaping provided. I don't know off the top of my head what that's going to look like.
Oh, I'll defer to the applicant. If I don't get a complete answer, I'll come back to the city. Externally, what are you requiring in terms of external street improvements, and to which streets? Is it both Collins and Longmire? I'm Coates and Longmire, not Collins, but what is expected in terms of streetscape, external streetscape landscaping?
Streets.
Longmire would have, our normal street landscaping requirements. Beyond that, I'm not sure.
Yeah, so I did not review the landscape plan for this. It would be standard frontage improvements for Longmire.
I slightly misspoke. I didn't. I talked in terms of a landscape. I should have made it a broader request in terms of just frontage improvement. So since this project fronts on both 3 streets, but one is already an improved street. As to the lesser improved Longmire and Coates, what are the statutory requirements for frontage improvement, or the ones imposed for this application?
I would have to defer to our development guidelines for that. I do know that curbs, gutters are required, lighting is required. And a sidewalk also for our local access residential standard, sidewalk on at least half of the street.
Right. And the adjoining side of the street would have those improvements made.
Longmire and the new access drive, the proposed access drive.
And Coates and Collins just get me confused every time. I'll invariably get the wrong one. But with Coates, there is no sought frontage improvement because there is no access off of it.
That's correct. We didn't have any conditions relating to improvements on other roads.
And as to colons, it's because it's already improved, is that? Or simply that it's not again an access route?
You know, I want to say with Collins, that one is already improved. But yeah, that does not have access. That's correct.
Is there proposed buffering between the development and all properties to the southwest, I guess, since we're working on a diagonal. If we were to call that this, or to the west or southwest.
No, there is no buffering.
And so what likely would then, what would be the setback from that neighborhood? If I was on the property immediately adjoining this to the southwest, what would I encounter? How close would the buildings be? Would I have any sort of vegetative or other screening or buffering between me and those buildings?
There's a fence there, right?
Yes, there is an existing fence there along those properties. Right now, we don't have any additional requirements for buffering or screening. Just the standard setback you can expect, which I believe is 15 feet. I'm sorry, the rear yard setback is 25 feet.
And help me better understand Yelm's policies with this type of overlay. Again, it's designed, as you've indicated, to be creative, to offer different activities, to recognize certain goals being comprehensive plan. But it's also being sort of parachuted into a neighborhood. And with respect to the city standards that direct there'd be some level of harmony between new and old development. How might, to what extent you feel this development harmonizes with its surrounding neighbors? How good of a fit do you create?
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess for us, the main criterion is, does it cause disharmony? And we don't think it rises to that level. Is it different than the surrounding area? Yes. But is that a bad thing? We don't think so. In fact, we want to encourage a mix of housing types so that we don't really have a monoculture. And I guess that would be my answer.
And I certainly may have been guilty of mischaracterizing the city's policies or their philosophies behind those policies. And to the extent I may have said anything that was sounded uncomplimentary, wasn't meant to be. But I was trying to get a better sense, and maybe you just provided that, Mr. Cooper, with, again, when you look, when you have city policies that allow for an intensification of land use within zone district, when your zoning policies anticipate a certain degree of development, but then overlays allow for intensification of that on the belief that there is a public good achieved from that greater density. Public good has a lot of different connotations, and in thinking about that public good, I'm just trying to get a sense of whether consideration has been given to whether there is a net public good to having a higher intensity of use in this R6 zone than otherwise would be recognized. And maybe you've answered the question, but if there's anything else you'd want to add to what said, anything further?
No, other than, I mean, I guess to reiterate that, the public good that we see here now is providing affordable housing, which is in short supply everywhere. And Yelm in particular.
So in light of any of my questions, Mr. Weedy, Mr. Cooper, anything else you'd like to say or any additional staff you'd like to present at this time? Okay. That will conclude the city's presentation. We'll then turn to the applicant. And I should have asked earlier, who is representing the applicant today and their relation to the applicant. So who are we?
I'm the director of construction with South Puget Sound Habitat, and I have my civil engineers from LDC here with me.
Oh, so let me get everyone's names. And so Ben, your last name is?
Francois, FRANS.
And you are, I'm sorry, the
Director of construction.
and then with you is,
Mallory Dobbs, MALLORY DOBBS. And I'm the civil engineer with LDC.
and
Tyrell, TYRELL.
TYR
TYRELL.
Bradley.
Yeah.
And you roll.
Civil engineer as well.
Mr. Francois, would you like to speak or did you wish one of your other representatives to be?
I'll let the engineers do all the magic here.
Okay, that's what they're being paid for. So who would you like to have present then? All right, so Ms. Dobbs, why don't you have her come to the podium? Have you sworn, do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
You've heard the city's presentation, you're familiar with the staff report in light of, as well as additional public comment, and taking all of that in consideration, what would the applicant like?
Yeah, so I just have a couple comments or additional things to add to some of your questions. So you had questions about the parking, how we were providing two off-site or off-street parking stalls. We ended up not doing on-street parking due to the projects needing to be on step tanks. As part of this is another additional thing. So a lot of the city of Yelm is on a pressure septic system. So due to step tank setbacks, we have to put tanks on every lot in the front of every lot. So to meet some setback requirements and to provide the parking, we have that addition as well. So with the need for the open space, and the entire development as a whole, we provided those as well. So we are meeting the current requirements for the city code of two off-street parking. And we did not provide any additional parking for anything else. We are doing improvements on Longmire that will propose street parking per the city code. So frontage improvements on Longmire will consist of widening the current road, providing additional parking stalls, landscape strip, sidewalk. And then additionally, we had emergency access that we needed to provide. So we're thinking that's not providing on-street parking will help that EV access and making sure that people aren't parking within the cul-de-sac. For the street standards within the development, we are providing curb, gutter, sidewalk, trees, lighting, all within the internal roadway, our new private roadway. And we will be doing sidewalk on both sides of the street, which I don't believe was required. So we were adding additional safety by providing sidewalk on both sides. And we touched on the buffer aspects of the adjacent neighborhood. We will be providing landscape throughout the development. And the adjacent use might be slightly similar, but there is a single family residential development to the southwest. So we believe that it's similar use. Let's see. And then for the development as a whole, as a planned residential development, being unique and providing additional things for the city of Yelm. So we touched on the fact that the price ranging from 30 to 50% AMI. So that was something that we feel for the housing plan, that was something that was provided to the city of Yelm that would be helpful. We also are providing eco-friendly buildings for the green building standard that will be architecturally designed by Arsons Group. And they will be EV ready as well. I think that was all of the notes that I had to add to additional applicants.
Just a few questions off of that. Don't recall if I had a good enough site layout. Are there landscaping strips between the street and the sidewalks, or is the sidewalk proposed up against the street?
Yeah, so on Longmire, we are proposing.
I'm sorry, internally.
Internally, yeah, internally, it'll be drive lane, curb gutter, planar strip, sidewalk.
Just said it.
Yeah, you're good. Curb, landscape strip, sidewalk.
Okay,
The landscape strip is will largely be a lot of the driveway entrances. And then in between those will be meters and trees and things.
have you presented a conceptual landscape plan?
I believe so, yes.
Have I received one?
I don't believe we submitted one in the staff report.
Okay. So to the extent that it's demonstrated on your conceptual landscaping plan, what did you envision as to perimeter landscaping? Not simply street or frontage improvements, but perimeter landscaping. What does it call out for in your plan, or if any?
I believe we have some sort of screening around the perimeter, but I don't recall specifically.
Does anyone perhaps have a copy of that plan today?
I have my laptop and could bring it up. That's
Do you recall it having been identified as one of the documents that's part of the city's file for the project?
I believe a preliminary landscape plan was required with all of the preliminary plat documents.
Well, I'm just wondering if it's one that's on the city's site that I perhaps may have overlooked.
I'm looking right now to see if I can pull it up, but it was not included on our staff report.
Okay. But your staff report has there's the report with any attachments, and there's also the other documents that may have been submitted with the application that tend to show up on your site as well. I'm just curious if it might show up separately from the staff report on the list of documents.
Okay. Yeah, I'm looking for it right now. But I'm sorry, I don't know where it is off the top.
If I would like to see it. Yeah, without it, it's a little difficult to ask the questions as to, as you were envisioning this, Ms. Dobbs. And how, I'm just curious as to the thoughts as to the application of this design into its neighborhood. And what thoughts or what level of consideration went into that one point in which this development comes up against its neighbors, and how that intersection point operates. That's a poorly worded, it's not even a question really, but that concept. Do you have any thoughts as to how consideration was taken in that? Yeah, I guess I do not recall that one. That's a slightly added on to. Okay, so the record should reflect that on the screen, staff has pulled up what is a conceptual landscaping plan, which is showing us landscaping along the internal street. It's showing us some landscaping around the retention pond or vegetation. And then it's showing frontage improvements along Longmire. So that's what it's demonstrating. And what I'm curious about, and again, we're working at a diagonal, so south and north don't work well, but to the extent that we can refer to it as the south or the southwest, would be on this diagram would be the lower portion, where this this development then connects with its neighbors. I'm most interested in that stretch and any additional thoughts you may have about the interaction of this project to those neighbors.
Yes, so I think as previously stated, there is an existing fence along the backsides of those single family residences. Additionally, providing screening on the bioretention pond to provide some additional. Necessarily, people need to look at a stormwater pond, but we are not currently providing screening along the property line as far as landscaping goes. It was not a requirement. We are bringing the houses up into the roadside. So basically where the houses are set right now is as close as they can get to the road by meeting all the step tank setback requirements and everything in front of the homes.
There's an interesting interplay between the city's regulations and my role as hearing examiner, in that my role is slightly modified from those regulations, in that the project undergoes the statutory review and meeting those guidelines. And then I'm given this somewhat vague directive to make certain that the long list of statutory requirements for public good are achieved. Not a well-defined mission or goal, but nonetheless there. And so as I look at projects, I always look as to whether or not I've made them fit in an appropriate way to their surroundings. My question would be, in this case, do I find any reason if I was to approve the plat or the development to nonetheless further condition it upon further screening? And what might be the applicant's response to my thinking out loud about further screening?
I think we can certainly provide additional screening. I don't think that would be an issue for Habitat. I think that we don't necessarily want to like suffocate the development, right? We do feel like, you know, the area surrounding the neighborhood isn't necessarily super closed in and treed, but I certainly think that we could provide additional screening if that was something that needed to be provided.
I think that finishes my questions for the applicant. There may be more following public comment, as I should have pointed out that in addition, both the city and the applicant will be allowed that opportunity for response following all public comment, but it may also generate some questions I have of one or the other. Is there anything else you would like to add at this time? All right, thank you. And Mr. Francois, would that conclude the applicant's presentation then?
Yes.
Okay. So we've heard from city staff, we've heard from the applicant. We now turn to the third phase of today's hearing, which is public comment. And so there was the sign up sheet. Oh, thanks. We have 5 individuals who have requested to be heard. That's not very many. And so I don't forget the 5-minute thing. If your presentation goes a bit longer, there aren't enough wishing to be heard that I'm going to pose rigid time limits. And what I'm going to do is simply go through these in the order in which they're showing on my sheet. And then after I'm done with that, I'm going to make certain that there hasn't been anyone who had a later wish to be heard and isn't found on this sheet. So we'll go through that. So Wayne Robinson is the first individual. Good afternoon, Mr. Robinson. Let's have you sworn. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Go ahead.
I just like to say, one would hope that the residents have been thought of as the design is made. And I sometimes wonder, looking at this, if that was the case. To me, looking at the map, which is not on the screen now, I'm across the street of the now forming fire hose of cars that are gonna be coming in and out of this location. Now, they've got 2 spots per car, per house. So you figure where friends gonna park? And out of 22 families, there's gonna be, I would estimate, lots of friends. So I think the traffic issue is a big question to me, and the density issue is a question to me. I can understand housing's a problem, but I don't think the fix is just across the street from me. I think development is necessary. It's been a vacant lot for many, forever until now. And it just seems like an awful lot of houses on a small spot. And, that worries me. I'm just questioning the effect it's taken out on my lifestyle. And basically it more than doubles the houses on Longmire. I just think it's a little bit too much. I believe in development growth, but I just don't think they took neighbors into account when planning on the effect. So that's what I'm thinking.
The next is Shalene LaPrame. Hope I've got both names correct. Have you sworn first? You swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Go ahead.
So, this actually has a personal impact on me in my business. I have a cottage bakery. I'm across from where the development will be happening on Longmire Street. We've already had one impact before with fire hydrants coming in, taking out one spot directly in front of our house, and we already fight for parking across the street continuously now that that one spot's been gone. I can't imagine what this development is going to do to that. It already impacted my business too, because when the construction was going down for 3 months, I couldn't get my customers to no longer come to my house because it blocked off that entire road. We're gonna have that happening again. Not to mention with the fire hydrants and stuff going in. At one point, I was baking something and my hands were covered in dough and I couldn't even wash that off of me. There was no communication when things were gonna be shut off. No communication as to when the roads were gonna be blocked, none of that. Everything happened so sporadically that it really, really hurt me personally. And I'm afraid that's gonna happen again because the project's happening right on our street. I will also mention that I have 2 children that get on and off the bus there. And numerous times people use our street on Longmire to go speeding down. And I can't let my friend or my kids play in front of my house for that very reason, because people are always using that street as a shortcut to come across. I can't imagine more traffic being down our street already. I mean, and if there is, there needs to be like speed bumps or something to prevent people from coming down at those speeds that they're coming down. Probably that crazy lady that comes out there yelling at people, but I don't care because my kid's safety is my concern. And it's my biggest concern with this. That and parking. I mean, parking's huge. If there's extra runoff, there's not a single spot left on Longmire for there to be an extra car or an extra friend. Otherwise, the residents are the ones missing out on our street. And they're not even considering us that are further down, just exactly behind and on the side. But that's that entire street that's impacted, not just right behind and in front of where the development's happening.
One of the purposes, benefits of public hearings is to just exchange notions, to hear ideas, respond to them, come up with thoughts. to the extent that your concerns are about parking on Longmire and how they affect your small business. Has any thought, have you given any thought to suggesting to city that there be time limits on parking on Longmire? Or do you, in this context or any context, would timed parking on that street be a potential workout of some access issues along that street?
If that would work if they didn't put a fire hydrant right in front of my house. There's no parking other than stall parking until they leave, which is fine, but like I said, it already took away an additional spot, which already took away from the household. I have a cottage bakery, so it's, I guess I
got tangled up between my question and your response. What I was wondering is if people being told that they could park on Longmire during certain times of the day for only a length of time. How would that impact you or others beneficially or harmfully? What might, if there were some sort of restraint on lengthier parking along Longmire, good or bad? I'm just curious.
be harmful for directly in front of our houses, because then where will we park? Maybe in those giving like overflow spots.
Okay.
maybe,
Which is why I'm asking rather than, I'm just getting a better sense of. So I was mindful of your commercial interests, but there's also the residential interest in the neighborhood as well, aren't there? And so those may be a little bit in, not so much in conflict, but having different goals.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I'm kind of both too, because I'm a home occupation permitted cottage bakery. So it is ran from my home through Washington State Department of Agriculture. So I mean, this is my home and my work.
Oh, got it. Okay. And are you a retail based or are you,
I'm retail based, yes.
okay, so you have customers coming to your establishment?
Yes.
Oh. All right. I've asked you a bunch of questions. I threw you off the presentation. I didn't mean to. Is there anything else you would like to add?
Pretty much, my concern is parking and also the amount of traffic flow without there being security measures to protect our kids down that street. Especially that, because right now it's already crazy on that street.
Okay. Thank you. The next is Cecilia LaFrame.
Hi.
I look up and you're suddenly there. Good afternoon. Let's have you sworn. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Go ahead.
Well, parking is my sole, I shouldn't say sole concern, but one of my biggest concerns. And I'll explain why. Here on Collins Street, right there, there's emergency parking only. There is no public parking allowed there. On Coates Road, that is the 507 or whatever, the alternate thing. So there's no parking on Coates Road whatsoever, because that is basically our alternate route around Yelm. So the only place that they have to park is on Longmore and Van Trump, and as you've already heard, it's already a big problem. I feel that the city hasn't really taken public welfare into consideration, because they didn't do a public meeting about their fire hydrants. They went and put out some kind of a public, I don't know, it was like through Facebook or something that they were going to have something. So we didn't have any chance to do something like this about the fire hydrants.
So let me stop you for
Okay.
a minute. I really work hard not to interrupt, only when it's gonna, I think, help me in some way. Otherwise, I don't.
Okay.
I don't try to interfere with people because it throws them off, and I don't mean to do that. But I'm one step behind on the fire hydrant issue.
Well, the fire hydrants, there was, there's all these bump outs. Do you think that they would put it on the opposite side of the street where there's like bump outs?
Right.
Nobody's,
I'm sorry, what I meant was, was there an earlier project in which they were installed that was an issue, or?
they did, but I can pass over the fire.
I'm not trying to redirect your testimony. I'm just trying to understand a little bit better some of the history. I may not have a full history. It's impossible to know every one of my jurisdictions as intimately as I would like. And so some secondary things about neighborhoods simply don't come up in the record very cleanly. And so I tend to learn about them through testimony. And one of those is past projects that may have affected both attitudes or city development in some way that isn't showing up in the report that I'm getting. And yet the populace is already on edge or concerned about something else, which is driving some of the thought process.
Well, we are.
And so that's what I'm just curious about. Is there something in the way of a background issue that you feel I might want to know more about?
Well, fire hydrants is also something that's in this development. I don't know where they're going. Well, and if the
So-
one that's in front of my house is supposed to
Okay.
serve that area, I don't know.
Your concern is that in addition to whatever fire hydrants there currently are, there will be one more, and you're worried that that one more will be in a
And
place
parking.
that cannibalizes parking. Okay.
Yes, because it's on the side of the street where parking's allowed. So it takes, you can't, there's certain rules. And so what the city told me when I called about it being in front of my house was, well, you can park in front of it. I'm sure that no one will really care. But I would care if there was a fire. So the other thing, if you look at their little picture and the small amount of parking that they have available, and that they swore that they were addressing that by having it on Longmire, but look, you have the big, huge bump outs or by where you're going to turn onto the road. And then you have that little tiny section right there. And maybe 1-2 cars can fit there. And that's 22 dwellings there. I propose that they maybe they talked about the septic systems. We also are part of the Northwest Housing Development. We did our housing, which is very similar to the Habitat. And to solve that problem, we put the manhole covers over the septics in the driveway. So that's a possibility that they might be able to do here that would ease up some of the parking so that they can have parking on their own street. That's one of the things that I proposed. The other thing that I would like to propose is that maybe they take 2 of those out and put their parking in their own area there so that they aren't impacting the area on the street of Longmire. And then my last thing is that possibly speed bumps being put? There's a lot of kids in the neighborhood and this is only going to add more to it.
It irritates people to no end when I point out things I can't do.
I get that, but
But understandably, it irritates them. There are certain things within my jurisdiction and things that are outside my jurisdiction. I cannot tell the city what to do with its public streets. I don't have the authority to do that. I wish I did sometimes, but in terms of establishing speed limits or traffic calming devices, generally speaking, I have no control over those. That sounds like a cop out of some kind. It's not meant as such. It's just trying to help define what I can give full consideration to.
Yeah.
It's worth hearing about, but in terms of sometimes people will say, well, why didn't that get addressed when we talked about it? Well, sometimes it's simply one thing beyond what I'm able to address, so.
Okay,
Okay,
that's all for me. Thanks.
all right, thank you. Shaylee Steele.
Pronouncing it right.
Good. So with Scheibmeyer, I'm more than a little sensitive about pronunciation of names, but let's have you sworn. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Go ahead.
So first off, I would like to say, I mean, I am one of the many moms of young children on Longmire Street. And one of my biggest concerns right now is safety. Longmire already has, not just in this section, because we're talking about adding, if there are only 2 cars per household, 44 more cars going up and down Longmire Street. They're not just going to be moving on to Coates Avenue. They're going to be going all the way through Longmire, and they're going to be reaching the highway. And as they go through there, we have so many cars that are parked on the road already. You can't see when children are going to cross the road, and it's completely unsafe. As many people have said before, we have people that use our road to cut through, and they're typically, I've can almost guarantee they're going 40-50 miles an hour sometimes down that road. And adding more parking to that road is just going to, it causes even more safety concerns with my kids and the other kids in the neighborhood. As we move down Longmire Street, away from Coates Avenue, there are sections of Longmire where 2 cars cannot pass at the same time. There is a section across from essentially a field, it's undeveloped, where you have to wait for another car to pass to go through properly. And so now we're adding even more cars to that. That's going to cause a lot of congestion in that area. In that area as well, there's also no sidewalks over there. So we're adding more cars, and there's no sidewalks down the road. So while it's great that sidewalks would be added directly in front of this, we're not taking into account the entirety of Longmire Street before the highway. Sorry, as I get my notes up. And you know, in response to maybe having more cars parked there at Thanksgiving or at Christmas, you know, we're looking at it's not just a maximum of 44 cars. We're talking some high schoolers are going to have their own cars. That makes it could be 3 cars per household. We're talking babysitters coming over, friends. It's not just little moments where there's going to be too many cars. It's for long periods of time. And if all of that parking overflows to Longmire, once again, we're creating even more of a problem. It's completely, absolutely unsafe when it comes to the kids and everybody who already lives on Longmire. But I think my biggest concern is that the entirety of Longmire Street Northwest is underdeveloped for this many more cars to be added to traffic.
Thank you. Then I have Margaret McLeod. Give me just a second.
You have as many seconds as you want, Mr. Chairman.
Chairman is a new term.
Well, I just think it's easier than, Shabmeyer.
Mr. Hearing Examiner is the closest that you get. Occasionally it's a your honor, and I remind people that it's not a your honor. And I should have added, several of you who have testified, including Dr. McLeod, have done so by prior written testimony, and I've reviewed all of that, and I have reviewed yours. I say that not in some way as an encouragement to say less, but simply that I am familiar with all the materials that you presented in advance. So let's get you underway. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Go ahead.
So I appreciate the fact that you have already read some of my concerns, which were way back in December. And I have to say that I was a little disappointed that the city didn't take up my offer to be available for neighborhood input into the process, because I certainly offered that at the time. And I am the one that actually requested this public hearing. Whether it would have happened or not,
It would have happened. It's the requirement.
yes, okay. I had, but nobody said that. Nobody told us that. Okay. So my neighbors have really expressed most of the concerns that we have. I certainly was very pleased to hear that it was Habitat that was going to develop this particular piece of property, having been a longtime supporter of Habitat. I also know that my neighbors who did the Northwest project, and I live in one of those houses, which was of a very similar type, where the eventual residents, contributed to the whole building process of their homes. And I do have a question as to whether that's going to be this case too, with this particular development.
Oh, you mean how its ownership would exist?
The ownership, are they going to be participating by doing some of the developing themselves, which is what Habitat has done?
That is beyond the scope of my inquiry.
Okay, so can Habitat, and you ask Habitat if that's what's going to happen?
No.
Okay, so I expressed my question is out
I
there.
hope I didn't say that in a way that was offensive to you, but I am deciding land use issues within a certain.
I understand your language.
Bumpers,
I understand.
and those bumpers restrict the types of inquiries I make outside those.
Okay, but they at least heard my question.
They did.
Thank you
Yes.
very much.
Yes.
Probably my thoughts are these. I think that if they, the whole zoning, C6 zoning, it's between 13 and 14 residential units that are okay, or buildings, actually. Go back down to 13, take one of those away, and give us some extra parking with that one less unit. There is absolutely no room on Longmire Street at this point in time. And, the design shows that on the townhouses that, they're counting on people parking one behind another. And we know how difficult that is with having to move cars back and forth and all around, rather than side by side. So one of the units in the townhouse, they can park side by side. The other unit, they have to park head to toe, to whatever, like that. So that's already difficult, even for the residents. So, I just say take away one unit, make some extra parking for guests or whoever. Ideally take away two, but take away one. And then the other thing that concerns me is the traffic. So the other question I had was, when was the traffic report done? Was it done during the school year?
Well, it's part of the public package, and so its dates will be record. Mr. I'll have, I'll ask Mr. Weeby, it states. I've got a copy sitting here, I can find that, I can find that as well, but I'll determine that before we're done today.
Yes, it had to have been done during the school year when all the middle school traffic is going up and down Coates. That will only be legitimate because the school year is much more of the rest of the year than the summer.
Right, so traffic impact analysis, TIAs have to meet certain engineering guidelines. And taking into consideration, not only the traffic on the day in which it was used, but typical traffic and anticipated additional traffic cumulative impact analysis. So those are all factored in to a typical TIA. And again, it is a part of the record that's included within the staff report. So
Yeah, I mean, one of my main things as a physician is to be a problem solver. So the other problem, which is actually flow, because maybe we can get people out onto Longmire, which is only 2.5 blocks long. How big is this street? 2.5 blocks? Is that I think that at least in the future, and this has nothing to do probably with you and what you're able to do, but that a traffic circle at Coates and Cullens will allow for the flow, because right now they're going to have to figure out the stop signs that are going to allow for some kind of flow, or anybody turning left out of that project. How are they ever going to get across to get onto Coates to get out to 511? I have no idea why we can't have through access onto Cullens, where there is no parking, where it's a direct shot. I mean, and if you look at the plan, it's like, it's already got sidewalks and everything else. It's not going to cost a whole lot of money to do that. And I'm just baffled by why they wouldn't allow that kind of density to have more than one way to get in and out. And by the way, that would really help your fire engine.
thank you.
Thank you very much.
As promised, I'll make a last inquiry as to, are there any other individuals? Yes. Richard, you got it. Your name?
Sandy with a Y, Neil, N-E-H-L,
N-E-A-L?
N-E-H.
N-E-H-L, okay. And Ms. Neal, your address?
610 Trump Avenue.
So you sworn, do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Go ahead.
I appreciate all the comments that all the residents on Longmire responded to the traffic and parking issues. I totally concur with that. I just wanted to make one slight comment that all that traffic and the parking does affect Trump Avenue too. At this present time, we have a lot of spillover traffic that permanently parks, at least 4 or 5 vehicles that park on Trump Avenue because they have no place to park on Longmire. I had one additional comment, and as a response to your comment that my fence does back up to where all this new building is going to take place. I appreciate your question about how much, space there is between where our existing fence is and where their property line is. And I was just hoping some consideration will be given of it. There'll be some delineation between where their backyards end and the common space in between to do maintenance on fences, maintenance on trees, etc.
The current fence that's along there, is that a landowner by landowner, or is that a commonly maintained fence?
Landowner by landowner.
Okay, so it's not, and it's not of a uniform look or condition or anything else. It's just what each landowner has done with the fence.
Right, they were all, the fence was put in originally by the builder.
Okay, so it was commonly built and then.
It's commonly built, but it's individually maintained and there's no requirements, et cetera, regarding that.
Oh.
And there are a lot of large trees that do need to be maintained and trimmed back there. And some of them will need access, be able to get access there without infringing on their backyard or having their backyard infringe on our ability to work on that.
My questions would better if traffic jams on the freeway had not caused me to be late. That I would have done a pre-hearing site inspection, but I am going to do a post-hearing site inspection. No one will be present when I'm doing that. That's just my own inspection without anyone being present, so.
Yeah, traffic and parking is a major issue for all concerned in the neighborhood.
All right, understand.
And that's all my comments.
Thank you.
Thank you.
One last time, is there any other members of the public who wish to be heard? Record should reflect none. So that gets us back to an opportunity for the city to respond if it wishes to anything that was presented either by the applicant or by the members of the public. So Mr. Wiebe, Mr. Cooper, you've heard the testimony. Is there anything either of you would like to say in response to anything that you've heard?
Only regarding the traffic, I just want to discuss our process for how we evaluate the traffic. We're planners, we're not traffic experts. So we require the applicant to hire a firm to do a traffic impact analysis to look at the number of trips they're going to be putting out into the world based on the development, type of development, that kind of a thing. And then based on the, modeling that's pretty standard, they evaluate what the impact will be on the roadways and the intersections. And all of our roadways and intersections are assigned a certain level of service. I think it's like A through F maybe. A being the best and F being the worst. And this analysis indicated that that would not change the level of service on the roads. Now, we don't take that just at their word. We have our own consulting engineer that we farm that report out to see whether or not they agree. Was it done according to professional standards? Do they agree with the evaluation, the analysis, and what have you? And then we, as a planning department, rely on the expertise of our reviewing consultant. So that's where we landed in terms of our evaluation. I'm not saying I won't put more traffic out there. I mean, obviously, anytime you add a house or a business or whatever, you're going to generate more traffic, but what impact will it have on the service of the roadway?
Thank you, Mr. Cooper. It caused me to remember that Dr. McLeod had asked the question as to the timing of the TIA. And as you were giving that testimony, I was looking to see if my copy answered that question, and I'm not seeing dates.
You can pull that up. But I would say this, and these guys can tell me if I'm wrong, but it's my understanding that when you do a traffic analysis, you do it based on peak hour PM trips.
Yes.
And that would be between the hours of 4 and 6 PM. So it wouldn't really matter what time of year it was being conducted as far as the school is.
No, it should not. The question simply was, when may it have been undertaken? And I can't find an easy answer to that particular question just from the report itself.
I do see a date of April 11th.
Okay, thank you.
This year.
I was looking quickly and probably looking too quickly. One last question, Mr. Wiebe. Are there garages as part of these in addition to the parking stalls, or is this proposed without garages? I can't quite tell from the diagrams.
Yeah, forgive me. I do not believe there are garages. No.
All right. Okay, thank you. Ms. Francois, is there anything that you would like to, or your team like to say in response to the public comment you received? Sorry, just let me get my. Yeah, sorry, Mr. Bradley. You've not yet been sworn, so let's have you do so. You swear affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. You've heard the testimony of the public comment in the cities. What would you like to say in response?
I would like to address a few of the items, one of them being Habitat for Humanity occupants do indeed participate in the construction of the home to a certain amount of hours required from each individual homeowner. And that the landscaping in the
Yeah, that's fine for you to point out. It's not material to me.
no, I'm just providing it
Okay.
through you back to, they can hear me.
The tin cup thing.
Yes.
Right.
The landscaping in the rear yards, so we didn't show that as part of the preliminary plat package, as it's. That landscaping is installed in each individual building permit of each lot. And there is a there's a landscaping requirement per Yelm municipal code for a certain amount of vegetation required along each rear yard lot line. That does include a fence of some sort, that is a screen fence. So if there wasn't a fence currently at the rear yard, Habitat for Humanity will be constructing a fence as well as the landscaping required per the YMC. And the planning staff already addressed one of my comments, which was that the TIA was completed within the school year. I would like to point out that the Longmire frontage improvements that we're proposing, so there's a few sections where the curb bulbs out into the towards the driving lane, which would eliminate potential on-street parking at that location. This is due to the traffic safety of vehicles turning around that corner. We have to provide a certain amount of curb length before we can have a driveway cut. We would love to have pulled that back and provided more on-street parking directly adjacent to our project. But due to safety requirements at the intersection, we had to pull that back. So just so I'm addressing why those bulb outs exist. And then there was a comment as well about the internal parking and the step tanks. The step tanks are being provided within the driveways right now. And so we are already using sewer manhole lids for one of the public comments. And that was to, in order to create the parking needs on the site, we had to do that. And that is my only, or all of my additional comments.
Okay, thank you. We've heard then initial presentations, public testimony, and then response to that testimony, which means we've undertaken all the different legs of this hearing. And so the hearing is concluded. On some hearings, they are continued for further presentations of one kind or another. I'm not doing so in this case. But I am not complete in that I will undertake my own independent site inspection, which is largely a drive-by, some extent a walk-by of the property. It was something I would have done earlier today. It's something I'll do this afternoon, which once I've done, I'll then have all the information that I have to consider and what to do with this application. And I am under a city directive that I complete my decision within a prompt time frame, roughly 2 weeks. And so I'm sensitive to that at all times. And so I will get underway with that. So the hearing is adjourned. No decision is being immediately reached, but I will reach that decision as quickly as I can. When I've completed that decision, it will be sent to the city. And if you're interested in a copy, then you want to ask the city staff to provide one, send one along to you. It'll be available to the city electronically, and so the city can easily forward that to you for your consideration. So concluding comments, if they're needed at all. It may be evident that Yelm is a very dynamic and rapidly changing city in many respects, one of which is that not only do you find yourself in a rapid growing population, but you have a city whose staff is relatively new and has evolved through this process. You've seen that. I, as hearing examiner, have been in this role less than a year, I think. And so it means that that there are a lot of different people making important decisions with relatively sometimes short lengths of stay with the city. I don't know that is any way impactful. What I am impressed by is the professionalism of the city as I've dealt with it in the last year or two. I handle roughly 15 cities and 2 counties. I'm familiar with a lot of staffs, and I'm impressed with the Elm staff and its professionalism in dealing with these kinds of applications. And I'm also familiar with a lot of different groups who come before me. And the presentation today was one I appreciate. It was articulate, it was on point, it was civil. It didn't seek to become underhanded in any way. And so it just shows that people who have a respect for the community and demonstrate that in the way they behave in a room such as this. So I want to thank you for that kind of presentation, and I'll try to reciprocate by as articulate and intelligent decision as I can render. And again, I'll do that as quickly as I can. And with that, we're adjourned. Thank you.